The courtroom was quiet. So quiet you could hear the deep ticking of the clock on the wall, each second pounding against the air like the beat of a drum judge. A setting normally filled with stern tones, rustling papers, and the sharp bang of gavels now contained only quietness, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Each look, each consideration, each scrap of focus was fixed on one individual: Kody Brown. He perched on the witness stand, slumped over, his golden locks dull and unruly, not with pride but disinterest. His former non-negotiable confidence, the swagger of a man who oversaw 4 wives and 18 children, was absent. Instead, there was a shaking form clenching the edge of the wooden stand, as if it were the sole thing that held him together. The judge, a stern-looking man with steel-gray hair, leaned forward. His voice bore authority, calm but firm, cutting through the thick silence. "Mr. Brown, you may begin." Those words cut Kody deeper than any blow. His lips trembled, his throat constricted. He attempted to steady his breath, but the air was heavier with each breath, as though the courtroom itself were pressing against his chest. Kody's eyes roved the room. Benches were packed with faces he knew better than anyone, yet tonight they were strangers, a ghostly jury haunting him. His children stood in rows, folding arms protectively across chests, some shooting him wounded glances, others refusing to meet his eyes altogether. But the stingingest daggers were from the 4 women who had been his wives. Meri, rigid and remote, sat straight with her fists knotted together, her face impassive but steeped in history. The hurt of betrayal still sat in her eyes, but she refused to let him have the pleasure of tears. Janelle gazed down, her jaw clamped tight. Years of uncomplaining endurance had etched lines in her face, and although she said nothing, her silence shouted louder than words. "You never cherished me." Christine, shining but shaking, had tears already brimming. Her chest puffed and sank, as if each intake of air promised to shatter her facade. She had loved him the most openly, and maybe that's why she had betrayed him with the fiercest heat. And Robyn, the so-called favorite, the woman to whom he had devoted himself, sat white and brittle, hands writhing uncomfortably in her lap. For years she had been his shield, his justification, his excuse. But now, even her eyes seemed haunted, as if the weight of the collapse of his empire was bearing down on her too. Kody dipped his eyes, unable to maintain their gazes. He took a deep breath, and his chest shook as if that one inhalation was filled with decades of remorse. His words broke when he finally spoke. "I thought," he started, then halted, closing his eyes against the surge of memories that pounded him. Another breath, another shudder. And then, with words drenched in grief, he professed, "Ah, I thought I was constructing a kingdom, but I constructed a house of suffering." The words cut across the room like a knife. Even his enemies could not help but acknowledge the bite of truth in his tone. Gasps trickled diffusely through the gallery. His children fidgeted uneasily on the benches, some casting bitter glances, others dropping their eyes. His wives, statues in stone, showed cracks, an eyebrow twitching here, a clenched jaw there, a tear beating its chances to escape. Kody's hands trembled as they clinched the stand tighter, whitening knuckles. He seemed smaller, weaker, no longer the burly patriarch who earlier proclaimed himself the immovable head of the household. His voice wavered but conveyed a pain that resonated in every nook and cranny of the courtroom. "I see it now," he went on, voice barely above a whisper but cut with a sting to hurt. "I see what I did. I believed I was a leader, a guardian, a man meant to leave a legacy. But with each step I took towards creating that dream, I took another toward breaking the very people I said I loved." He looked at his children. "I said I was giving you a gift, a family greater than life, a family that would be impenetrable. But you sat in rooms where your mothers wept. You were raised on listening to murmurs of jealousy and betrayal rather than laughter. You lived under the shadow of a man too arrogant to accept he had made a mistake." The silence became thicker. This was the type of silence that required notice, that compelled everyone in the room to face the naked truth unfolding before them. Kody's breath came faster as his feelings knotted with embarrassment. He flattened his hand on the wood of the stand, grounding himself. For the first time in years, his facade was lost. He wasn't the smiling TV personality, the self-appointed head of the family, or the man who swaggered with conceit on national television. He was simply Kody, a shattered man standing amidst the wreckage of his decisions. I glance at all of you now, he breathed, his head canted a little way toward his wives, and wonder if there ever was a moment, a single moment, when you still trusted me, when you still believed in me, because I don't deserve that now. Not after everything I've done. Meri's eyes flickered, a faint shimmer betraying the tears she refused to release. Christine lowered her face into her hands for a moment, shaking her head. Janelle remained stoic, her silence deafening. Robyn's lips trembled as if she wanted to speak but couldn't find the words. Kody swallowed hard. His Adam's apple bobbed up and down as he struggled against the bulge in his throat. He longed to scream, to fall, to apologize. But all he could do was make the pain seep slowly through his words. This courtroom, he weakly gestured around him, feels like the last chapter in my life. Not due to the law, not due to any punishment that can be given to me, but because for the first time ever, I am deprived of everything. The titles, the wives, the children living together under one roof, the facade of harmony. It is gone, all of it. And the only thing remaining standing is the truth. He stopped, his eyes moist, his voice dropping to a whisper. And the fact is that I failed. The words hung, ringing more loudly than any gavel fall. His admission wasn't merely heard. It was felt seeping into the marrow of every person in the room. The judge shifted restlessly, maybe not used to such naked emotion flowing into his courtroom. The court stenographer, fingers shaking on her keys, slowed down as tears filled her eyes. Kody stood up just a little bit, though the burden of his shame kept his shoulders slumped. He breathed again, hard and unsteady, as if finding the courage to strip away more of his past. I believed that love would spread far enough to encompass us all, he said in a whisper. But love is not a net into which you toss men. Love is a fire you must cultivate, gently, evenly, all the time. And I let it go out, with each of you. His voice cracked once more. He hung his head, shoulders quivering as the courtroom observed the man who had ever thought he could never be broken, finally break in their presence. The silence grew heavier, no longer hollow, but charged with the burden of all that he had lost, all that he had wrecked, and all that he could never get back. And despite his testimony having just gotten underway, it was unmistakable. The storm finally broke over Kody Brown. Kody's voice trembled as he tightened his grip on the stand, his eyes dropping somewhere far off, as if looking not at the courtroom walls, but into hazy halls of his memory. When I was young, he started, his voice low, hoarse with memory. I believed in a dream. He paused, as if the words themselves were too burdensome to bear. The silence closed in again, insisting. I believed that I could create something sacred, something permanent, a family that would transcend the difficulties of the world, a family that would demonstrate to God, to the world, to everybody, that love could stretch far enough to embrace more than one heart, more than one wife, more than one set of children. He raised his gaze to the ceiling, blinking fiercely as though attempting to brush the tears accumulating in the corners away. I believed the polygamy would make us stronger. I believed it would make us unbreakable. The judge shifted back a little, his face impassive, but his eyes holding the same interest as everyone else in the room. What had happened so horribly wrong? Kody's palms rubbed against the stand's wood, the shudder in his fingers betraying the tempest raging within. His voice gentled, as if he was talking to himself. Those first days, those were like magic. The kind of magic you hear about in fairy tales. I married Meri, and for a while it was us two taking on the world. She believed in me more than I believed in myself. She trusted me when I promised we could create something greater than ourselves. Meri shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Her eyes shone but her jaw remained clenched, refusing him the comfort of her tears. Then came Janelle. Kody went on. And I thought, this is it. This is how the dream begins. Each new marriage, each new baby, would be a foundation stone of our family empire. And when Christine came in, the laughter began. She filled our house with warmth and joy. She made me think it was all working, that this wasn't some idea floating in my head. It was real. He hesitated once more, his breathing unsteady, his shoulders weighed down by the burden of those early recollections. The curve of a faint smile played across his lips, but it vanished almost at once, disintegrating into grief. Times there were dinners of 20 voices around the table, kids tearing through hallways, laughter ringing in every corner. I was like a king in a kingdom made of love. I would enter into the house, and each room was alive. Every corner seemed alive. I believed I had made heaven here on earth. His voice cracked. He nodded, tucking his face into his hand, for a moment before continuing on. But heaven doesn't last forever. Not when it's based on pride. Not when it's based on my refusal to listen, on not seeing the cracks that were spreading under my feet. Christine's hand went to her mouth, concealing a sob she tried to suppress. Janelle breathed slowly, shaking her head as if hearing something she'd waited years to be said out loud. The truth is, Kody stated, his voice raw, it wasn't long before the dream became something else. Love turned to jealousy, smiles to suspicion, whispers to arguments, and he slammed his fist against his chest. I told myself I had enough strength to hold it all together. I told myself that my leadership would fix it. But every time I silenced one of you, every time I denied your hurt, I was hammering home another nail in the coffin of this family. The air was stiflingly silent. Even the air froze. It seemed unwilling to break his confession. I said to myself I was creating a legacy. But what legacy is founded on shattered hearts? His gaze ran over the benches, his children occupied. You witnessed it. You came up in the midst of it. Rather than witnessing unity, you witnessed your mothers weep. Rather than witnessing love, you witnessed strife. I wrote of God's plan, but I did not witness the pain in my own household. He clutched the stand so hard his knuckles whitened. His voice shook and hardened. I believed I was leading us to something sacred, but I was leading us directly into a tempest. One tear at last traced the weary lines of his face, and he did not brush it away. I would go inside the house at night, and be greeted with silence where there should have been laughter. I would look into eyes that no longer regarded me with love, but with doubt, anger, fear. I paid no attention to it. I told myself it was a phase, that if I was strong we would get through it. Kody turned toward the women again, his expression full of torment. Each of you begged me, in your own ways, to see you, to hear you, and I didn't, because I was too proud, too focused on proving I was right. I thought love could be commanded, demanded, enforced. But love doesn't obey pride. Love doesn't survive neglect. The impact of his words weighed heavily on all in the courtroom. Even for those with no interest in the Brown family, they caught themselves leaning forward, engaged in the tragedy before them. Kody's chest expanded and contracted with deep breaths. His voice became raspy. The dream that was like heaven, it became a prison, not me. For them, he pointed to his wives. For you, you lived in captivity in my dream, while I disregarded your nightmares. One sob pierced the silence. It was from one of his daughters in the second row, her face buried in her hands. The sob echoed agonizedly, like a reflection of the grief Kody was finally acknowledging. He gazed down at his shaking hands, then back up, his eyes bloodshot and teary. And now here I stand, the builder of a shattered dream, a man who believed he was constructing an empire for his family, but instead constructed walls of anger and rivers of tears. The courtroom was a tomb, each word weighed with oppressive stillness in the air, bearing down on each person who heard them. Kody's fantasy, the love empire and legacy he had so proudly proclaimed, stood revealed for what it had turned into, dust disintegrating in his grasp, incapable of being remade. And with every admission, the silence intensified, the tempest of truth building, to sweep away what was left of the illusion of Kody Brown. Kody's breathing caught as he clutched the wooden stand. He watched as he caught the eye of each of the 4 women who had once comprised his world. His lips quivered, and for the first time since he had opened his mouth to talk, his voice broke to a whisper. I have to confront you now, he said, shaking his head slowly. The women who constructed this life with me, the women I promised to love, honor, and cherish, the women I reduced to strangers. The room grew quieter. All the faces in the room looked toward Meri, Janelle, Christine, and Robyn, as if holding their breath for the unseen lightning bolt that was guaranteed to hit. Kody swallowed hard. His eyes fell first on Meri. Meri? His voice cracked, splitting her name into two syllables of sorrow. You were my first, my beginning, my foundation. Meri sat rigidly, her chin upended in defiance, but her hands gripped tightly together in her lap, knuckles white. You believed in me, when I was nothing but a boy with a vision, Kody went on, his voice shaking. You followed me into this experiment of faith. You trusted me when I told you we could create something holy, something greater than ourselves. You gave me your youth, your devotion, your heart. He shut his eyes, as if the burden of memory was too much to bear. And what did I offer you in return? Distance, silence, a marriage where you were a ghost. Meri's mouth compressed, her lip trembled, but she blinked the tear away, not willing it to fall. I allowed our connection to die, Meri, Kody declared, his tone growing louder now, cracking under pressure. I allowed it to dry up as I pursued everyone else, everything else. I allowed you to be left wanting in a marriage that could and should have been your sanctuary. I left you yearning for connection, for love, for intimacy, and I offered you nothing but rejection. His chest rose and fell. I betrayed you, not with my body, but with my neglect, and I don't know if I'll ever forgive myself for that. The courtroom fell into stunned silence, but the anguish in Meri's eyes shouted louder than words ever could. She looked away from him, her expression a stone and sorrow combination. Janelle Kody's eyes slid, shaking to the woman beside her. Janelle sat quiet, arms crossed, her expression impassive. Her quiet was her protection, and her fortitude caused Kody to stumble. You were rock steady, practical, the anchor of this family. When I whirled into my fantasies, you anchored us. You bore so much children, duties, weights no one saw. You bestowed me wisdom, balance, patience. His voice cracked again, and I shrugged it off. I shrugged you off. You told me things, and I refused to hear. You cautioned me when I was going the wrong way, and I didn't listen. I treated your loyalty like it was something that was owed me rather than valued. Janelle's eyes narrowed a little, her jaw clenched. I took you for granted, Janelle, Kody confessed, his shoulders sagging. I figured you'd always be around, no matter how little I returned. But no woman should have to live that way, waiting, hoping, begging her voice to be heard. For the first time, Janelle let out a hard breath, her lips quivering only marginally, before she clamped them shut again. She still would not cry, but her silence was so filled with judgments that Kody could not help but feel them. Christine, as Kody looked over at Christine, his entire body shook. She was already sobbing, tears streaming down her face, her hands shaking as she clutched a tissue. Christine, his voice was hardly above a whisper initially. My sunshine, my joy, the one who brought life to our home. Christine broke down into a small sob, her head shaking. You made me laugh, Kody went on, his voice stuttering. You made me loyal. You gave me more love than I knew how to hold. You carried my kids. You raised my spirits. You poured your heart and soul into this family. And what did I do? I suffocated you. I made you feel invisible. I ignored your needs, your suffering, your yearning for partnership. I offered you excuses rather than love. And when you begged me to see you, I turned my back. Christine covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking. Remember the day you walked away, Kody replied, tears streaming down his own face now. I was mad at you. I thought you betrayed me. But the truth is, you were the one who was brave. You were the one who said, enough. You saved yourself when I wouldn't save us. The words just hung there, and Christine just wept openly, her tears ringing through the silent courtroom, like rain on rock. Robyn, at last, just to the last woman just turned. His voice trembled as he called her name. Robyn. Robyn's face was white, her eyes wide and brimming. She had been folding and refolding a handkerchief in her lap throughout the testimony. And now it was creased, just past redemption. You were my heart when the rest of it was falling apart, Kody whispered. I held on to you, made you my center, my favorite, my excuse. I said it was love, but it wasn't fair, to you, or to them. By making you my lifeline, I drove a wedge deeper into this family. Robyn's tears overflowed, her body shuddering. I believed if I clung to you tightly enough, I could still maintain control of the empire slipping away from me. But then, I pulled you down with me. I made you the emblem of all my errors. And now, even you can see,
I lost everything. Robyn shook her head, weeping silently, hand pressed against her mouth, to mute the sound. The breaking point. Kody gazed at the four of them now, his chest rising and falling, his face slick with tears. His voice grew louder, desperate, pleading. You were my wives, my companions, my family, and I let you become strangers. I split you, hurt you, neglected you. I thought I was the leader, but I was just a blind man, leading us all into destruction. His voice broke again. And now here we are, sitting in this court, not as a family, but as fragments of one that I broke into pieces, with my own two hands. The silence was too much. Meri's jaw quivered. Janelle's eyes were closed. Christine wept into her palms. Robyn's shoulders convulsed. And Kody Brown, once the self-assured patriarch of a large family, before them nothing more than a shattered man, admitting to the women who had every reason to despise him, every reason to turn away, every reason to regard him as the stranger that he had become. Kody wiped his face with the back of his shaking hand. His tears reflected under the unforgiving lights of the courtroom, but he did not bother to conceal them. He had stood before his wives. Next came the portion that caused his chest to constrict, until it hurt, his children's faces. He slowly faced the benches, where row upon row of his children sat. Some leaned forward, arms folded, anger etched into their young faces. Others sat rigidly back, not looking at him.
A few had tears already dampening their cheeks, and some, those who had grown so far away long ago, viewed him as if he were no more than a stranger sitting at the witness stand. Kody's lips quivered as he attempted to speak, but the words were stuck in his throat. He clutched the stand tightly, holding himself steady. At last, his hoarse, cracked voice whispered, "My children." The two words were worth more than the score he had said previously. His chest rose and fell as he attempted a second time. "I thought I was bestowing a gift upon you. A family larger than anything the world could dream of. I thought you'd grow up in an atmosphere of love, with mothers to look after you and siblings to shield you. I thought you'd be proud, proud to be Browns, proud of the heritage we were creating together." He stopped, his gaze sweeping over their faces. Some of the children avoided his look, their jaws clenched. Others glared at him straight on, their faces hard, unforgiving. "But that wasn't the gift I gave you," Kody went on, his tone laced with shame. "What I gave you was confusion. What I gave you was pain." He shook his head slowly, tears dripping down once more. "You grew up with secrets in the dead of night. You heard your mothers weeping behind closed doors. You witnessed the rage, the envy, the shattered vows. I swore to you that we were together, but you witnessed the reality. You witnessed us falling apart." The courtroom silence mounted. Even the bailiff shifted uneasily, his gaze falling to the floor. "I said to myself I was defending the family," Kody declared, his voice rising, more desperate. "But I was not defending you. I was defending my pride. I allowed you to live in tension-filled houses. I allowed you to see your mothers fight for crumbs of my attention. And while I gave sermons on love and faith, I lived in blindness." He faced the rows again, his eyes begging, searching. "Some of you don't talk to me anymore. Some of you won't even glance at me. And I don't blame you. I failed you. I failed as a dad." One of his daughters, her shoulders slumped, her hair falling to her shoulders, suddenly erupted in sobs. She hid her face in her hands, sobbing softly within the room. The noise cut Kody like a knife. He shook with the whole of his body, his fists clenched against the stand. "I recall birthdays I did not share," he growled out. "I recall the evenings I was too caught up with fighting with your mothers to sit beside you, to hear about your day, to put you into bed. I recall the times you asked me to listen, and I said I did not have time. I see it now, every second that I should have appreciated, every one I wasted, and I can't retrieve them." His voice fell to a whisper, shaking. "I said I loved you, but love without presence is empty. Love without listening is hollow. Love without sacrifice isn't love." Another child moved forward, eyes blazing with red. "You picked her over us," the young man growled, his voice shaking with fury. "You picked Robyn, again and again. We all knew it. We all saw it." The judge's gavel came down once, sharp and authoritative. "Order," he ordered, but the words lingered in the air, unavoidable. Kody's shoulders drooped,
his tears running freely now. "You're right," he whispered, his throat rough. "I did. I picked one. I said it was still love, still family, still unity. But it wasn't. It was favoritism. It was selfishness. It was cowardice. And in doing that, I lost all of you." Benches creaked as kids looked at each other, some bitter, some sad, some shattered by the words they had waited decades for. "I wanted to be the dad who provided for you," Kody told them, laying his hand flat on his chest. "But what I became was the dad who left you scarred. You should have had laughter, not tears, security, not turmoil, love, not lectures." His breathing became labored. He leaned forward, his forehead almost against the stand. "I see it now, all the promises I made. I broke. I promised you we'd be one family, and we were never that. I promised you I'd always be here, and I wasn't. I promised you you'd never be alone. And so many of you spent your whole lives growing up in silence, wondering if your father even noticed you." His words broke open the hearts in the room. Even those who had grown hard against him felt the cut of the truth. Kody raised his head, his face flushed and tear-stained. "You will bear those scars into your futures. You will tell your children stories about the father who couldn't love correctly. And that will be my legacy. Not the dream, not the kingdom, not the empire. Just broken promises." A silence came, more weighty than any that had been. One of the little ones leaned on a bigger one, burying her head in a shoulder. A son gazed at the ground, his head shaking slow, lips tightened. "I can't change it," Kody breathed, his voice barely audible. "Time does not offer second chances. I can't erase your tears. I can't restore your childhoods. I can't reinstate the trust I destroyed. All I can do is stand here, before all of you, and say, I was wrong. I failed you. I failed all of you." He looked up, his eyes moist but firm. "And if you never forgive me, if you never call me father again, I deserve it. Because I gave you broken promises when you deserved unconditional love." The courtroom remained frozen, the only breaks in the silence being soft sniffles, muffled sobs, and the quiet scratching of the court reporter's keys. The judge's gavel remained still, unbotted, because nothing could shatter the seriousness of what had been uttered. Kody Brown, formerly the patriarch of a sprawling family, stood here naked before his children, not as their leader, not even as their father, but as a man who had finally owned up to the truth. He was the creator of their suffering. The courtroom was no longer quiet. Quiet weeping echoed from the benches occupied by Kody's children, some holding on to each other, others seated stoically, not wanting to reveal what moved below their surfaces. The wives, his ex-partners, his erstwhile buddies, sat motionless, their gazes on him. The judge leaned forward, hands clasped together, his face stern but not cruel. "Mr. Brown," he said quietly, "you've talked of your past, your wives, your children. But this court requires your truth, completely without apology. What do you have left to tell us?" The question hung like a challenge. Kody's body shook. He clenched the wooden stand in his hand, as if it alone held him upright from falling. His chest rose and fell with every labored breath. For a long, agonizing moment, he did not speak. Then, with a convulsion that seemed to rip through his very body, he spoke. "My truth." He stopped, his voice cracking. "My truth is that I devoted my life to pursuing a dream that ruined the very people I loved." The words shook like thunder in the quiet. "I said to myself that I was a leader, that I was selected, that I was creating a legacy. But the reality? I was merely a man who craved control. I wrapped my selfishness in scripture, wrapped my pride in tradition, and called it love. But it wasn't love. It was power. And power poisoned me." He pressed a hand against his chest, his fingers wrapping around the material of his shirt. "I preached sacrifice, but I sacrificed nothing. I asked for loyalty, but I gave none in return. I told my wives they were equal, but I exalted one above the others. I told my children I'd never leave them, but I left them when they needed me most. I told the world we were strong, but in here, we were breaking apart." His voice cracked once more, and he shut his eyes tight, as if the truth itself seared. "I wasn't a husband. I wasn't a father. I was a man blinded by his own ego. And in the end, I destroyed my family." Gasps ran through the courtroom.
One of the older kids hid their face in their hands. Meri blinked repeatedly, trying to hold back tears streaming into her eyes. Christine clenched her jaw, fists forming in her hands. Robyn shifted, lips quivering, but she still focused on him. The judge's eyes narrowed. "And what do you want this court to understand, Mr. Brown?" Kody's entire body trembled now. His low, hoarse voice held the weight of a man on the brink of collapse. "That I am guilty," he said, barely above a whisper. "Not of crimes this court can punish, but of crimes against the people who trusted me. I am guilty of pride. I am guilty of betrayal. I am guilty of wasting years we'll never get back." He turned once more, his gaze sweeping over his children. "You will bear my transgressions. You will bear the burden of the father who wasn't present, and that is the price I can never flee." A sob ripped out of him, deep and raw, bouncing off the walls of the courtroom. He buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shuddering wildly. For the first time in years, the man who had once strode about like a king was now completely shattered. The judge waited patiently, allowing the moment to unfold. When Kody finally lowered his hands, his eyes were red and swollen, his voice raw from crying. "I don't hope for forgiveness," he whispered. "I don't deserve it. I don't hope for reconciliation. I don't deserve that either. All I can do, all I can give, is this truth. The truth I might have spoken years ago. I failed you all. I loved me more than any of you. And I will regret it, until my last breath." For a moment no one stirred. The words hovered in the air like a chilling song, lingering long after the music stopped. Then gradually, one of the smaller children, her face pale and smeared with tears, rose. Her tiny voice shook as she whispered, "Daddy." The one word shattered what little resolve Kody had remaining. His legs gave way beneath him. He clutched at the stand, catching himself only just in time. His tears streamed freely, and for one moment the courtroom was silent. But then the child sat down once more, tucking into the embrace of an older sibling. The moment was gone, leaving Kody emptier than he had been. He turned back to the judge, his voice barely above a whisper. "That is my testimony. That is my life. Not a kingdom, not a legacy. Just broken pieces." The judge tapped his gavel once, the sound sharp and final. "The court acknowledges your statement, Mr. Brown." His voice softened as he added, "And may the truth you've spoken be the first step in whatever comes next." But for Kody, the jury had already reached its verdict. He glanced around the room once more, at the wives who no longer loved him, at the children who no longer trusted him, at the family that he once thought would forever be. And then he spoke, almost under his breath. "All I ever wanted was love. And it slipped through my hands." The gavel fell again. The session was adjourned. But for Kody Brown, the true sentence had only just started, being stuck with the unbearable burden of his own admission, aware that the empire he constructed was reduced to nothing more than rubble, and those he damaged would bear the marks of his decisions long after the courtroom cleared.